Alright mates, how's it going? In today's video, I'm covering the fate of Naxxramas and the Nexus War from Chronicle Volume 3. So let's get... The Valiant's expedition and the Warsong offensive marched deeper into Northrend, making their way towards the Lich King's seat of power in Icecrown. Although their journey had launched separately, both factions eventually ended up in the frozen valley of Dragonblight. And it was at this point that the Scourge were like, "Surprise, mother fluffers," and hit them with its first major counterattack. The dreaded necropolis, Naxxramas, appeared in the skies above the Horde and Alliance's forces, and it was probably a rollercoaster of emotions for the Alliance in particular, due to the fact that they'd chosen not to destroy it back in vanilla, but hindsight's a bitch. The floating citadel was also under the command of its former master, KelThuzad. He'd been reborn by the power of the Lich King, and he was even more powerful than before, just like he'd said. He directed his undead armies with lethal precision, attacking the Horde and Alliance from all sides. And he had spies hidden amongst their ranks which sowed chaos and told lies and stuff. Things weren't looking great for either faction. But KelThuzad had made one big mistake. He brought Naxxramas to the front lines like an idiot. And now champions from the Horde and Alliance could smash his back doors in. Side note, I keep checking WoW Model Viewer to see if it's letting me import armory characters yet, and unfortunately it still isn't. I don't know if that's just a thing that doesn't work anymore, but as soon as I can start putting people's characters into the videos again, I will. But in the meantime, we'll just stick with using lore characters. Champions stormed into Naxxramas and just started tearing shit up as they fought their way through. They weren't going to make the same mistake twice. This time, they were going to make sure there wasn't a next time. Eventually, they were face to face with KelThuzad. Again. In Phase 1, he was invulnerable, and the champions needed to take care of a bunch of ads. Soldiers of the Frozen Wastes, Unstoppable Abominations, and Soul Weavers. The soldiers basically did raid-wide damage whenever they touched anyone. The Abominations periodically debuffed champions, reducing healing received by 10%, which stacked. And the Soul Weavers did knockbacks and caused shadow damage. So lots of things going on. Fantastic. But after 3 minutes and 48 seconds of that crap, KelThuzad became active and Phase 2 started. And he had 14.5 million health, so that's great. KelThuzad had a number of frost damage abilities which also reduced movement speed. He charmed people with his lovely charisma. He could destroy a portion of a player's mana, summon swirlies, and do stuns and stuff. But once he was down to 45% health, Phase 3 started, and he summoned 4 Crypt Lords, called the Guardians of Icecrown. Pretty sure he did that last time. They each had 14.5 million health as well, and periodically buffed their own damage by 15%, which stacked up to 99 times. But despite all that, this second iteration of the Naxxramas raid was actually easier than the first version. Plus, some of the champions had faced KelThuzad before, so they won, obviously. KelThuzad was defeated, and rumours quickly spread that his soul was lost to the Shadowlands. And with his defeat, the Lich King was deprived of one of his most powerful lieutenants, just as the invasion of Northrend was reaching its peak. This was unexpected, and kind of annoyed him a little bit, but lucky for him, another threat was on the horizon, which would soon distract the heroes of Azeroth and give him a little bit of respite. After the fall of Naxxramas, both factions established permanent footholds in Dragonblight and hoped to launch their final assault on Icecrown as soon as possible. But word arrived from the Kirin Tor which kinda got in the way of that plan. They'd finally uncovered what was happening at the Nexus. Malygos and his blue dragonflight were draining the world of arcane magic and killing anyone who dared oppose them. Archmage Ronin had also discovered that some of their own had defected to Malygos' cause, and that's terrible. The danger posed by the aspect of magic was so great that the Magi of Dalaran did something absolutely batshit crazy. They pooled their power and teleported the entire city of Dalaran to the skies of Northrend. Lazy bastards. From this new vantage point, they launched an offensive to stop Malygos' campaign, but progress was pretty slow. He was just too bloody powerful, so they called on both the Horde and Alliance to help. Neither Garrosh nor Bolvar were big fans of the idea of diverting resources from the war, but they reluctantly agreed. Members of both sides began to probe the defences around the Nexus, and they were soon joined by representatives from the other dragonflights. The mortals and dragons attempted to contact the blue dragon aspect and convince him to chill out, but he wasn't going to listen. He was too far gone. So at this point, Alexstrasza had a little brain trust meeting with ambassadors from the other dragonflights to discuss Malygos' fate. Even some rebel blue dragons attended the gathering. Malygos had already killed too many innocents, and his actions were upsetting the balance of the world. So with heavy hearts, the dragons came to an agreement that would become known as the Wyrmrest Accord. For the good of Azeroth, Malygos needed to be murdered. It wasn't an easy decision. Alexstrasza was especially sad because she viewed Malygos as a brother, and as Guardian of Life, she wasn't over the moon about the amount of bloodshed this war would cause. But if they did nothing, the number of lives lost would be even greater. So the united forces of the Wyrmrest Accord assaulted the Nexus. They fought their way through to the Eye of Eternity, and the fight against Malygos began. In Phase 1, Malygos had a number of nasty spells to contend with. Arcane Breath, which dealt a big chunk of damage to anyone dumb enough to stand in its way. Arcane Storm, which fired missiles at random targets. And Vortex, which tossed the raid group around and did arcane damage repeatedly over 10 seconds. He also summoned Power Sparks, which would slowly move towards him. These would buff him if they got to him, so they just needed to be killed before that happened. It's also worth noting, Malygos had a 10-minute enrage timer, which carried over all phases, so it was probably a good idea to kill him before that. At about 50% health, Phase 2 started, and Malygos took to the sky. He was now untargetable. It was another one of them kill the ads phases. The Nexus Lords needed to be picked up by a tank as soon as possible, because they'll one-shot a non-tank. And when these ads died, they'll drop flying discs, which can be used to kill the Scions. After all that, Phase 3 started and Malygos destroyed the floor that everyone was standing on, like a jerk. The raid group fell onto dragon mounts rather than to their death though, so that's alright. This was the final phase, so players needed to just burn away at the dragon aspect whilst avoiding a couple of things. Eventually, Malygos was defeated, and the Blue Dragonflight's campaign was put to an end. Members of the Kirin Tor would spend years reversing the damage done to Azeroth's ley lines, but eventually they would restore them to their former power. Meanwhile, the Nexus War had drawn the attention of the Black Dragonflight. Syntharia, a consort of Deathwing, managed to capture one of the few nether dragons that had escaped Malygos' wrath, whilst everybody was distracted. She drew on its power to create a new brood of creature called Twilight Dragons. However, Kalecgos and Corialstrath learned of this. They launched an attack on Syntharia, killed her, and eradicated most of her experiments. Unfortunately, they didn't get all of them. Deathwing discovered Syntharia's brood and was a little bit excited by them. They had a lot of potential, so he decided to continue his fallen consort's work, and we'll come back to that another time. And we're leaving it there! In the next Volume 3 video, we've got a couple of battles. One for the Wrathgate, which is exciting, and one for the Undercity, which is also exciting. If you enjoyed this video, like, subscribe, all of that bollocks, and all that's left to say is, thanks for watching, and see ya!